Dr. Jeff Nichols. So I think they liked it, maybe. You all stayed. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the story, because that's sort of where it all begins. And I mean, at the core for me is there's this really beautiful like father-son story, despite the fact that there's other elements happening. What was your intent and sort of the genesis for the film? Did it start there, or did it start?
It didn't actually. No. When I write, I always try and write on two tracks at once. Kind of plot track or a genre track and a thematic one. And I knew that would come for this film, but the first thing that came was really the genre. It was really this idea. I had this image of two guys in a really fast car driving through a southern road in the middle of the night. And I remember distinctly actually talking to Mike Shannon. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you were in this fast car and just moving from town to town in the middle of the night, and we could call it Midnight Special. And I got pretty far along that path, in fact. I remember, actually sitting while we were making Take Shelter, and I could tell you pretty much shot for shot the opening of the film all the way through when that creepy old guy sneaks in and, kind of sabotages the boy. Like, I had all that worked out before I knew what the movie was, what the movie was really about. And I definitely had to kind of pump the brakes on the plot of it all, because I knew, having made these other films, the only way they resonate at all, or even have a chance of resonating, is if I attach them to something very personal to me, some emotion that is palpable in my life, and that usually becomes the basis of this thematic track that I talked about. And so it was about a year into my son's life, 8 months actually, that he had a febrile seizure, which is it's the body's reaction to a spike in fever. It actually happens to like 1 in 1,000 kids. There are no lasting effects. He turned out to be fine, but my wife and I thought he was dying. And it very much kind of shocked me out of that first year of fatherhood. And I started to realize, obviously how precious he is, but also how little control I have in his life. I have no control over whether he lives or dies. I have no control over who he becomes as a person. And so I just started asking myself, why am I here as a father? And I realized, I think as a parent, it's your job to try and define who your child is. Try and help them realize who they are. Because at some point they're going to leave you. That's the cycle of parenthood. And when they leave, you hope that they leave intact. You hope they leave knowing something about themselves. And so I have this kind of thought and this really intense fear and love and all these feelings as a father, and it just so happens I'm working on this silly sci-fi chase movie idea at the same time, and I decided to put all of that into the middle of it, and that really becomes the trajectory for Mike Shannon's character and Kirsten Dunst's character. They're just trying to figure out who this boy is, which is kind of what I think parenthood kind of is.
And was it, so when you thought of it as this car driving around, was it from the beginning a sci-fi, or did the sci-fi come?
Yeah, that came pretty quickly, because I knew they could only move at night. I don't know why, and yeah, you just start to kind of build that out. I didn't want to make a vampire movie. I didn't want to make a horror movie, and so it felt like a sci-fi movie. Yeah, and I'd done that before. With Take Shelter, it was a psychological thriller. Like even Mud was a getaway film. But then you take that and you kind of upend it. This definitely, I think, wears the genre more on its sleeve, obviously.
And you shot this actually on film, 35 on actual film.
Yes.
Or most of it on film, because there was one part you had to do digitally. Right?
Yeah. We made a rule that any driving shot at night in a car would be shot on the Alexa.
What's the Alexa?
The Alexa is a digital camera. And the reason I shoot film, and have been lucky enough to shoot film, is that I feel like it's the most organic format. I think it replicates our human experience better, except when you're in a car at night. It betrays itself, because there's no way you can be in a moving car at night and have enough light outside of the car to do what our human eye does. You know, our human eye can make a correlation between the foreground thing you're looking at and the background thing you're looking at. Film can't do that. Now you can fake it, but I don't like to fake anything. So yeah, we shot that digitally, and I thought that stuff worked. You know, when we originally did film tests for the boy's eyes, for instance, probably 80% of the lens flares that you see that emit from the boy's eyes, those are all in camera, because we built this light rig on these goggles so that when he looked into the camera, you would get these awesome, beautiful, natural lens flares. But we did a test on film and we did a test on digital early on. And the digital, it was pretty, but the lens flares were so crisp, it just didn't look organic. And as soon as we got the film test back, we just all knew that was obviously the look we were going for.
So the goggles he was wearing, that was actually special. That was actually coming off of
The
his.
vast majority of it.
It was goggles, so it wasn't a special.
We had
effect?
two, and we call them goggles, but even for when he's not wearing the swimming goggles, we had this light rig built and had a wire that went down his back to a battery, and we just soldered really bright LED lights on the front of it, and it really began as a way for me to have light interplay with the actors, so that not when I'm pointing at the boy, when I'm pointing at the actors that are working with him, that they had something to look at, and there would be some representation of light on their faces that was connected to the swivel of the boy's head, not just some grip standing there with a light. And so it actually started there, but then when we flipped the camera back around, we realized it was actually creating the effect we thought we would have to do digitally, but luckily we didn't have to.
I want to ask you about the cast, and just you have an extraordinary ability to bring out the best in actors, and you've worked with one, you found this amazing young boy, and then so go from that, and then to go to Michael Shannon, who's been in all of your movies.
Yeah,
So how do you cast, and
I've had
what's
a
your
lot
connection to Michael Shannon? Why is he in every single movie? Or is he going to be in all of your movies?
I hope so.
Sorry, I was just trying to be funny.
No, that's
like Adam Driver. He was really funny in this
that is
movie too.
funny. Mike's easy because Mike's one of the greatest actors in the world, and so that's easy. Mike makes me a better writer. He makes me a better filmmaker. He taught me how to be a filmmaker on Shotgun Stories. Mike does not suffer fools, and he's a very serious guy on set. And I think he snaps everyone into focus when you're working with him, and that's a really powerful thing. In fact, on Mud, I was worried without having him around that I would be less focused, and that wasn't true though. I think it kind of imprinted on me through Shotgun Stories and Take Shelter, and I owe him a lot for that. But also, just as an actor, obviously I like to remove narrative exposition. I don't like much dialogue, and I know I can get away with that if Mike Shannon's playing the lead, because he's going to fill in all those gaps with subtext. He's going to understand that character backward and forward, and he's going to be living that stuff on the screen, and hopefully some of that will get transmitted to you guys. So, that's Mike Shannon. Yeah.
He had a small part in Mud, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was
which I wrote for him.
Yeah.
But he wasn't there every
Yeah.
day on set. It wasn't the same deal.
I thought maybe I dreamt it.
Yeah, no, he's there. And for the boy, I've had a lot of luck casting kids. The two boys in Mud. I cast a 6-year-old deaf girl in Take Shelter, and they're all great. And I think, it's all in the casting process. It's what it really is though is you have to understand the attribute or the personality, quality that you're looking for, and it's specific to each character. Jaden's an incredible actor, but I wouldn't have put him in Mud. He wouldn't have belonged in that world, but he did belong in this world. But what I was looking for with this character, I knew I needed him to be aware. At some point, he turns on to this awareness of his place in the universe, and that's a character trait. That's a personality. It's not something you can act. And when I met him, that's what I was struck by. He wasn't trying to perform for me or tap dance for me. He just had an understanding of where he was in the room and who he was talking to and what was going on. And there was kind of a wisdom that literally you can't fake it. An adult actor couldn't fake it. And he had that built in, you know? And so as soon as I saw that, I knew in the front half of the film I could mute that. I could stick his nose in a comic book and not give him any lines, and he would just kind of, you know, be there. And then look up and wake up, and it would feel like a transformation.
I have one more, and then I want to open up the audience. But Adam, I mean, you have such an amazing cast in this film: Joel Egerton, Kirsten Dunst. But Adam Driver, you know, did you write that? Like, he has that really interesting sort of comic timing and sort of comic relief. He adds a little bit of.
He made it better.
You know, so he adds something to the film, but I don't know if how that came about. Did you intend for that to be, or was that more in the casting because you knew he could bring that to that role?
It wasn't in the casting because I didn't know his work very well. I didn't watch Girls. In fact, it was the studio head that recommended him because they had worked with him on This Is Where I Leave You.
Probably because the studio head knew that he was going to be in Star Wars.
Probably more than I knew. But I think Adam's incredible. I think he's going to be probably one of the most important actors of our generation. And I knew I wanted Sevier to be this weird mix between like Richard Dreyfuss in Jaws and Truffaut in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But that's a really dangerous place to create a character from because it's cliche. And what Adam immediately came in and did, he picked up on a few things that were in the script. You know, this ridiculous, outdated recorder, and the fact that he always works on legal pads and with dry erase boards and sticky notes. Like, obviously he's a brilliant mathematician and works at NSA. He has access to, he could probably build a computer from scratch. But he seemed like an analog guy. He seemed like that's the way he wraps his mind around things. And so he really started to embrace that. But like, for instance, I think one of his funniest lines is when there's that handoff scene with him and Joel Edgerton's character. And in the script, it was written as, are those handcuffs? And the guy looks at me, he's like, do you mind? And Adam Driver, he shows up and he goes, are those handcuffs? I mean, obviously, they're handcuffs. And that's a better line. It's because, you know, and he was being really polite to me to not just go like, I can see they're handcuffs, that's a stupid thing to say. So he just made it better. And that's kind of what he did at every level with that character, is he just made him better.
Are there any questions or comments? Lots of them. I'll start here in the middle. We'll work to the side.
Okay, first one, Sarah, loved it.
Thank you.
You say this is your most personal?
In a way, it is my most
So
personal film. He said he loved it. And he asked if it was my most personal film. In a way, it is. You know, I think Take Shelter might be a more successful film if my stated goal as a filmmaker is to find this palpable feeling in my life and transfer it to the audience by the end of the movie. I don't care about plot. I don't care about endings, and I'm sure you all are going to ask me about it. But I do care about transferring an emotion that I feel. And in a weird way, when I think about Take Shelter, I had my hands wrapped around that from the beginning. As a father, I didn't. But it was intense. It was more intense than what I was feeling, the anxiety and the fear that I was feeling when I made Take Shelter. This was more intense. I remember I was, not to get too somber, but when I was driving to work one day to write this, and Sandy Hook happened. And I haven't cried since I was a kid. And I pulled over on the side of the road and just kind of wept. And I felt like I'd had this experience with this febrile seizure with my son, and then I felt like, as a country, we had that experience. You know, I think as a country, we did a really good job after 9/11 of grieving as a country. I think Sandy Hook was so freaking terrible and devastating that we couldn't process it. I don't think we have processed it. I think we just turned our backs on it. But I knew people were feeling that, because I was feeling that. And like, it still gets me. And that is what parenthood is. It's this duality between absolutely loving this person and being terrified at the same time. And I still don't have my arms around it, but I tried to make a movie about it.
How about over here? I'll start down. Yes, sir.
Great film. I'm a big sci-fi buff. You put a lot of things together really neatly.
Thank you.
Working with Warner Brothers, you think there's a push for a sequel, or have you thought of one?
Is there a sequel on this film?
You guys go tell all your friends to see it in a couple weeks. Nah, I wouldn't hold your breath. It was funny though. I think since The Hangover, they've always worked sequel rights into the contracts of the actors. And there were some of the actors that were like, you know, no, this is a small sci-fi movie. We're not signing up for sequels. And Warner Brothers demands it in their contracts. And I was talking to a studio executive because some of the actors weren't playing ball, and he was like, "You're gonna have to fire one of them." I was like, "Which one?" And I said, "Look, let's back down from this. I tell you what, if we make a sequel, I'm in charge because I create all this. So if somebody doesn't want to be in the movie, I'll just write them out of it." And he says, "You can't do that." So I go, "Yes, I can." And he said, "No, you're not in charge." He said, "The audience is in charge. And if they want that character, we're going to have to pay to get them." And I actually think he was kind of right about that. And it was a very humbling moment for me on the phone with a studio executive, because I was like, I'm not in charge of my own. But no, I mean, I've got some ideas, but I doubt it. I'd be shocked.
Moving up, yes.
Yeah, so speaking of Warner Brothers, you may or may not know, but there's another Superman property coming out soon. So it's interesting to have Superman as part of even the marketing on the poster, as well as integrated into the plot. So I was curious if that was an interesting conversation to have with the folks at Warner Brothers about using the Superman imagery in the movie, and if that was important to you, if you had a plan B, if they didn't want that association.
So the question about the Superman usage and the fact there's another,
I'm gonna
there's
be
another
honest.
something coming out.
I'm pretty sure he was reading a different comic book in that photograph. I'm not kidding. But nobody asked me, and fine me. So originally, when I wrote that scene, when he talks about kryptonite, I wrote it as adamantium, which is the metal that binds Wolverine's, bones. And of course, we were sitting in a meeting, and they're like, "Well, we're doing this DC thing," and I was like, "Well, do you guys have adamantium?" And and it was really cool because the executive on his phone texted Jeff Johns, who is in charge of the entire DC universe, and was like, "Yeah, what was it called? It starts with a P. Oh man, I forgot it. But they do have adamantium, and nobody knows what the hell it is." And so we didn't do that. And of course, you're sitting there thinking about it, and like, well, the only, the joke is that there's this thing that we all know about, but the boy's been cloistered away in this religious ranch, never read a comic book in his life, so he wouldn't know what kryptonite is. It's a real innocent question. The fact that I had General Zod driving the van is, that's a meta thing that I didn't have any control over.
How about all the way over here? Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi there. So good job. I have a really quick comment and a question. One, this is a really good example of how to make a sci-fi film with a small budget. It kind of reminds me of Cocoon a lot, where you have that implication of sort of hope in another world. However, when the city appeared, it doesn't seem like a really phenomenal, overwhelming experience for Earth, but like everything else in the story just kind of paled in comparison. And I found myself wanting more about this world that I heard. Sorry. So I don't know if you felt that way too. And also, what was it with the last shot in the movie? Like, what did that intend to you? Was it the kid talking to the dad, sort of?
So there's the comment about when the other world appears, which I think you did such an amazing job creating so much in our imagination that when the reveal happens, it works, but it's also, we all have our own ideas what it is, so it's sort of like, oh wow, that's what it's like. So it's like, what was your thought as far as the fact that it was a lower budget film, and then you had this big reveal, and then something about the end, like question about the ending.
Yeah, the end.
Do you have concerns about that in terms of what the reveal is going to look like and how the sort of that moment would play out?
I never had any concerns about it. I'd written it that way from the beginning, and I just never doubted it. What's really interesting about it, and Take Shelter operates this way too, it says a lot about people, where they land. There's a whole contingent of the audience that wishes I never showed anything, and it's it's seeing the sharks and not the yellow barrels, and it's really a reveal they wish they could take out of their minds. And then there are people like yourself that want more out of it. So I've made a completely dissatisfying ending. I've given them exactly what they don't want on both sides. But you know, it was very important for me to show it. It just felt like a cop-out not to show it. And but that being said, it was very important for me not to give a point of view to their world, just to give a hint of maybe some benevolence or something, but we don't know what's going on there, so that was very important for me. And as we started kind of the calculations of showing this film to people and test audiences and everything else, I mean, you know, we got everything. People hated it, people loved it, people wanted more, people wanted less. And I just had to go back to kind of the foundational principles of why I wrote it in the first place, you know, which, you know, it just didn't really matter to me. What mattered to me was that these parents had this realization that this boy was okay. That's all that mattered to me. And I can get into the details of the story and everything else, and the look of it and all those other things, because I put a lot of time and energy into that. But,
and that's why it worked, I think, because it was the emotional resonance of that, you know, of the family and the parents and him going off. But that's what was the important part about it.
That's a trajectory I was working on, you know. And then the end, I don't really answer that question. It's really, if I wanted to answer it, I would have. And so it doesn't make any sense for me to show up and just answer it for y'all. You know, what I want is for people to talk about it. And some people could see that as a metaphorical, you know, relationship to his son at the end, and some people can see it as a literal one. Have your pick, you know. The same with Take Shelter. I don't answer, did he see this thing, did he not? Is he crazy, is he not crazy? It's irrelevant to me. What's important to me is that he and his wife are seeing the same thing. And we're on the same page. And so, you know, that's this kind of movie. That's what I'm going for.
How about in the middle? Yes.
Yeah, I found it pretty interesting how you portrayed the deep state in the movie, like the CIA, NSA, FBI, that sort of thing, and how there were a real lack of lawyers for the people that were being questioned.
So are you questioning what sort of how true is that? How does our deep state, you know, the people in the shadows how do they really work, and if they, you know, stop you, do they give you a lawyer? So how did you do any research in terms of sort of you know, State Department or
There's
Secret
actually
Service
a couple
and
funny stories
FBI?
about it. Like, well, a couple things. Number one, I'm going to take a little bit of credit. I wrote this before Edward Snowden, and as those revelations were coming out, I was kind of shocked. I actually, you know, I had this opinion of kind of the way, and this was during the search for Osama bin Laden and everything else. You know, there's that is it a Tony Scott movie? That movie Enemy of the State, where like somebody gets on a cell phone and like 2 seconds later, like there are Black Hawk helicopters following them. I don't think that's how that works. I've been to the DMV. I've seen the government operates, and I thought, you know, to look at look, the only thing I know about the government, other than these books I've read, are things I've learned from other movies. So that could be really terrible. And my solution to that was to say, okay, I think this is a giant bureaucratic institution, and I'm going to pick one point of view character that does not get to see all the other pieces moving. So all these things happen in the background, in scenes that we don't see, and we just have Sevier, and we're just looking at Sevier. So that was kind of my answer to it. The funny part is, so we had a lot of military stuff in the movie, and Warner Brothers has these great connections with the Department of Defense. And there's a guy at the Department of Defense, and his whole job is to review scripts and approve whether or not the U.S. government is going to help you make your movie. You know, I'd seen Man of Steel, and they had like this entire division of soldiers, and those were like real soldiers. I was like, I want that. Can I get that? And they're like, no. No, you can't have that. Because as I was having that conversation, the Snowden stuff was hitting, and to his credit, he was like, no, we have to, the reason why I exist is to make sure that the government is shown in an appropriate light. And he said, you've got an NSA agent that ends up betraying his government and releasing this boy. And he was like, that's not how we roll. And so we had to rent all of our movies.
So you said this was more movie inspired. Were there filmmakers that inspired you in terms of the sci-fi genre that you would?
Of course.
give
I mean,
credit
it
to?
wears it's on the poster. But Starman, Close Encounters, those are the two. Those are the two. There are others, but those are the two. Everybody mentions Firestarter. I don't really watch Firestarter. But Starman. But even Starman takes a backseat to Close Encounters. I think Close Encounters is one of the greatest films ever made. And you try and kind of understand the essence of those films and the experience that I had growing up in the 80s and revisiting those films, because I didn't get to see it in the theater originally. But that experience of this mystery, and it kind of goes to your point, this mystery that develops into a sense of awe, hopefully. I like that. I like that worldview. I've never hung out with Steven Spielberg. I don't know him. I don't know his worldview. But I don't like hopeless films. And it was very important for me to make a film that had all of this mystery and had all of this pain and had all of this stuff in it, but went to a place that was hopefully awe-inspiring.
Maybe we have time for one last question. I'm gonna go over here. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
So, what about the guys from the church with the rifles?
Yeah.
What about the guys from the church with the rifles? what about them?
They could or they could have not been there. I mean, they weren't successful, but what did you think they were going to do?
Why would? In terms of,
Oh, I got it.
what did you think?
You're talking about how hopeful it was. The guys from the church,
Yeah.
they didn't seem very hopeful.
No, they're the bad guys. No, look. This is a big one again. I don't believe in bad guys, but I do believe in evil. And I built each of these characters to have a belief system of their own. The parents have a belief system in the boy, from a parental point of view. Joel Egerton's character I painted as an agnostic. Adam Driver's character I painted as a spiritualist. The ranch represents an organized belief system. We all have one. Whether we have one that we've adopted from a prescribed religion or we're building it ourselves, we all have one. Now, I grew up Methodist. I went to church on the weekends. I think organized religion does a lot of good out in the world. But I think it can be dangerous. And I think it becomes dangerous when someone says, I think I have this figured out. I think I've built this belief system, or I've adopted it, or crafted it, and now I believe in it so much, you're going to believe in it. And I think that character that you mentioned, played by Bill Camp, I think he has a moral compass. I think he knows the difference between right and wrong. And I think he let his belief system trump that. And I think that's evil. So I don't know what purpose you wanted from them in the film. But I wanted them to represent the evil of a zealous belief system. And I thought that was important in a film that deals with belief.
Thank you.